Thank you for joining everyone for our high performance webinar. Got myself, I'm based at our HQ out in England, and joining me is Sean and Satik, who are over in Adelaide. So we'll introduce them a bit more in due course, but just wanted to give a quick overview of sort of our vision at the Root Academy and what our aim is. So there's lots that come into it, but our main aim is to find ways to encourage more people to play cricket, and that is done on our end a variety of different ways. So coaching camps in the UK and abroad. We have a wide range of training aids. We just launched a new level 3 coaching diploma, and obviously our high performance program, which is the purpose of this webinar. And as I said, we'll get into more detail of that with Sean and Satik. So I know you two will talk a bit more about the program in detail, but for anyone that isn't quite aware, the Root Academy High Performance Program is split into two 10-week blocks. So it runs from October all the way through to March, and is based out in Adelaide, Australia. Play training throughout the week and play competitive matches at the weekend, and everything that could be expected to be included with that is. So Sean, do you want to introduce yourself to anyone that isn't aware of you, and just talk a bit more about the program and what it entails, and then after that, Satik, you can talk a bit about your role and how you come into it all as well.
Yeah, righto. Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, my name's Sean Seagate. I'm based here in Adelaide. I've been running this program for 18 years. So it's been running a long time. A lot of cricketers through that program, and fortunately enough to see 34 players who actually gone on and played international cricket. Having said that, this isn't just a sort of an elite cricket program. We get players of all cricketing abilities, and we get them from all parts of the world. So I remember the one year I had players from 14 different countries in the program in that particular year. But also, just in terms of how it works, is that, like, again, I've had nets where I've had someone like a Liam Plunkett in the nets bowling, and alongside them in another net is a club cricketer from England bowling, but doing the same training session. So I suppose I want to make the point that it's not just for top end cricketers. It is for any cricketer, and my basic attitude towards it all is that any cricketer that actually wants to come out here and work hard is more than welcome to sort of join the program and look to develop their cricket game. So how that works is that just to sort of give a bit more detail in terms of how the program works. So the program is based around 3 key philosophies, and this sort of underpins everything we do, from a training cycle to a training week to a training session. So the first thing we talk about is getting players uncomfortable, and by that I mean understanding that improvement only happens where players are prepared to get uncomfortable. So mistakes and challenges and sort of a bit of struggle along the way is part of getting better. Any program that just sort of where everyone's successful all the time is not, in my view, getting players better, because all it is doing is just players doing what they can already do. So, and that's not just from necessarily a cricket perspective. Like that uncomfortable is coming away from home, living away from home. It's having to stand on your own 2 feet. So while we're there to support the cricketers, we're not there to sort of necessarily, like they come from, a school program and where they're told what to do most of the time, whereas they have to drive things more so out here, and we're there to support them. So we keep challenging. Like I was just telling Daniel then, one of the things we're doing tomorrow, we're starting as part of the program, is our leadership program. So again, that's about challenging players and setting up actions and behaviours that actually drive their time out here, that's going to help them improve day to day. So that's one of the parts of the philosophy. The second one is find a way. So by that, what I mean is that the game of cricket is always asking questions. So the cricketers that are able to find solutions to problems are the cricketers that tend to do better. But again, that just doesn't happen. You've got to create environments that allow cricketers to problem solve. And so what we do, our job as coaches, is to create problems. The job of the players is to find solutions to those problems. So when you go into the nets, very rarely, very, very rarely is it just a bat and a bowl. There is always something going on within the session. So we have different focuses in different sessions during the week. So we have competitive sessions, we have mental skill sessions, we have game skill sessions, or game skill development sessions. We have individual skill development sessions. So it's very varied, but there's always purpose. There's always learning opportunities within those sessions. And you know, one of the things that happens in every session is there's reflection. So there's discussion during the session or at the end of the session, in asking players, you know, what's worked, what hasn't worked, why hasn't it worked, how are you going to get better. There's players giving each other feedback. So from a bowler's perspective, talking to the batters about what they saw and vice. And the third bit is about developing the person. And for me, this is almost the most important part because, and again, I'm not talking about cricketers, you know, being good or bad people. It's not about that. It's about actually cricketers. Again, I did mention it before about being self-directed, because one of the things about you as a cricketer is that everything you do and every choice and decision you make in around your cricket comes back to you. So if you're someone that looks for shortcuts, doesn't put in effort, makes excuses, doesn't do the things that are asked of them, that's going to impact your game of cricket. Vice versa, if you're someone that does those sort of things very well. And I've seen, as I said, I've seen hundreds of cricketers through this program. And a large, generally speaking, the ones that do well and kick on are the ones that comes back to them as people. I'll give you a quick story about that to add some, you know, to make it sort of real. You know, a few years ago, we had a guy called Dom Bess, you probably heard of, played a little bit for England off spinner, and he was out here, and we were in Sydney playing against a couple of the Big Bash academy sides. Anyway, we had a guy called Sean Tate, you probably heard of, played for Australia, fast bowler, and he didn't, at the time, he was just playing T20 cricket, so he didn't have a state contract. So in terms of his preparation for the Big Bash, he played for us. But anyway, the point I want to make is that after that game, we asked Tatey, out of all these cricketers, and there were some good cricketers in there, Kohler Cadmore was another one, out of all these cricketers, which one do you think's got the best chance? And bearing in mind, Dom Bess did not do much in the game. And he thought about it and he said, Dom Bess. And it was purely based around him as a person and how he handled things. He was hungry for information. He was asking questions. He wanted to learn. And so that's just one example of, you know, sort of what I'm saying in that who you are as a cricketer or who you are as a person has a big impact on where you go in the game. I look at a Joe Root when Joe was out here, and that's sort of my relationship with Joe when he was 19. You know, as a 19-year-old, he was like a 28-year-old. He was incredibly mature. His ability to problem solve, his ability to drive his game, his ability to understand what he needed to do next, his ability to actually do things that he talked about and not wait for coaches to tell him to do things. And bearing in mind, he actually didn't make a lot of runs out here. But the thing that was so impressive about him was him, the person. And, you know, it's easy to say in hindsight, I suppose, but, you know, you could tell this guy was going to be successful. So those things are very consistent through the program, and they direct us in terms of what we do. So the structure of the program is that, so we train Monday to Friday, and then on a Saturday, they play club cricket. Generally, Sundays they don't, because in Australia it's different to England. because in Australia you basically only play on Saturdays. You play the odd Sunday, but generally speaking, it's only on Saturdays. But again, what I say to English people or players that come over from there is that you don't want the same system as where you're coming from, because otherwise you're just getting more of the same. You want a new, different set of challenges, because that's going to challenge you differently. So for English players, and again, we play two-day cricket, a lot of two-day cricket out here. It's the ability to adapt to that, and it's new, and again, it challenges players in different ways. So Mondays to Fridays they're training, so they're doing weight sessions, they're doing conditioning sessions, they're doing individual skill sessions, they're doing mental, tactical, game skills, fielding sessions. So it's quite varied. And they do recovery. We do self-reflection. So twice a week we do self-reflection. So they reflect it from the weekend, and they also reflect at the end of the training week. We have things like matrix that look inside their game, and they actually rate themselves in these different areas to actually how they've gone during their week, and start to see, so they're continually looking inside their game and not just sort of looking in a very general sort of sense. They're looking at all aspects of their game and what they're doing well and where they need to get better. So again, when I talk about reflection, because that's a huge part of learning. Traditionally, what happens with learning is players only do the doing aspect. They don't do the reflection, and the learning cycle is cut in half. The part that completes that learning cycle is the reflection, and that must be done. And again, we're not necessarily telling players what we think. It's all about giving players space to actually think about how they thought they went. And again, as a coach, you can sort of, if you don't agree with what they're saying, I mean, then there's an opportunity to actually have a discussion in around their game. So I've talked about the who's it for, the different levels. As I said, I've been lucky enough to, 34 international players that have come through this program. But I'm not here to say that just because they came to this program they're international players. But what I will say is I think it accelerated their development. And so what it enabled them to do is get to the next level of their game quicker by actually coming out and training and playing in the off season, as opposed to, spending an off season in an indoor centre on a bowling machine on a hard wicket in a very controlled environment, but coming out to Australia and getting all these things thrown at you. So I think the biggest thing you have to do as a cricketer is understand yourself and your game, and you only do that by putting yourself in situations where there's ups and downs. As we know, learning's not in a straight line. So yeah, I think that's a big thing, is actually just getting that experience at a young age. And I think the quicker you start to get your head around those things, it opens the window in what you can turn yourself into. I think the longer that is delayed, the smaller that window is that what you can turn yourself into. So, so there's sort of that. I'd also mention that, it's also, this program's for males and females. So we don't just have males. I mean, Tammy Beaumont came out years ago, and we've got a couple of girls out here at the moment, and they're just included and treated like any other player. I think what's different about this is the way we train. And as I said there before, like the mental skills and the tactical skills, and even the game skills about creating these competitive environments, because that's the game. The players that compete well and those things become habits and normal, I think are the cricketers that actually do better, because they're training those things all the time, as opposed to, sort of doing it now and then. I mean, mental skills tend to get talked about a lot, but they're not something that are practiced. So, for instance, today was our mental skill session for the week, and we talked about game mindset. So the players had some information that was sent out to them a couple of days ago. They read through that and they prepared for the session. We then sort of briefed about how we're going to go about things today in the nets. Then they came up with their way of actually applying their game mindset in a competitive environment. So, as a training, what we did is we created pressure, and we created game context with penalties around it, which actually then made it realistic to see if those sort of mental skills held up, or if they didn't, maybe what they could have done to actually improve that. So, that's, I think that's very unique in terms of what we do. And the other part is, as I said, tomorrow we start our leadership program that underpins the whole program. And that's about developing the person, but it's about identifying behaviours and actions that actually that sort of drive their game. Because, as I said, a lot of what you need to do it's about what you do and not what you say. So our job as coaches, we don't come up with these. So for instance, like they might come up with something like, sort of discipline. Well, what's discipline look like? So we actually identify the behaviours and agree upon those behaviours. That actually what discipline looks like. And then our job as a coach is to hold the mirror up to them through the course of their program, to see that they're living those things, not only from a cricket perspective, but also outside the game, outside training and playing. And it holds them to account. And so we review those things through the course of the summer, and they get feedback. And they give each other feedback in regards in around these sort of behaviours and actions. So, again, I think that's a really important part of their development, to actually understand what that looks like for them, that they're going to give them the chance to be the best that they can be. What else have I got here? What else have I forgotten there, Sadik?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, Satik, do you want to talk a bit more about your role and how you help the players on the program, and then I'm sure we'll come back to Sean with questions from people and on the call, and we've also got a few questions from people that couldn't make it. So definitely go back to Sean on that. But yeah, Satik, just want to talk through people about your role in the program?
Sure. So my name is Satik Roy. I've worked with Sean for quite some time in this program. I run the operations of the entire program, help a lot in terms of before you come in, prepare you as a player, prepare you in terms of what is expected, help out with the visas, and once you come in, work with the logistics. My background is pretty much, I've worked as a mind coach for a long time. I do work with few players on one-on-one mind coaching. We talk a little bit as far as their mental aspects are concerned. So that's one area I kind of focus on. We do have other experts as well, but that's basically my background, because for me, coming from a psychology background, for me, mental aspects of the game is very, very important. Obviously, you've got your skills, you've got your technical abilities, but we've seen players over the years who are probably technically not very good, or physically they are not very fit, but mentally they are so strong that any obstacles that come in their way, they just take it in their stride and go ahead. So I somehow feel that if mentally we can strengthen a player, that makes a significant difference in his or her development. One of the few aspects which probably I wanted to highlight was a couple of things which we do quite differently. Is the first process, obviously you send in your application form, we read out, we kind of understand before a player comes in how what's your level. We actually see what games you've played in the past. Based on that, we put you in a club, and that's one of the biggest challenges for us, because we don't want to put a player in a club where the level is so high that he or she is not being able to compete, and vice versa as well. Here club culture is very, very important. We've got very, good talented players didn't fit in the club, but at the same time we had players, who are not as, well known, or not heard of, but they have gelled so beautifully in the clubs that almost every year they come in, to play club cricket. So that's one aspect I focus quite a lot on. Another aspect, that we talk about is, skills is there. You've got talent, but at the end of the day, for every player, it's important how badly he or she wants to improve. As I said, we've had players before who hasn't shown too much of promise, but they were so desperate, to make it, in a bigger stage. They said, it doesn't matter where we are, what we do, I just want to get better. And we those were the kind of players who actually, become successful over the years. In a nutshell, my role is obviously a bit on the operational part, but I also work a little bit on mind coaching, and the mental aspects of the game. Sean.
Right. I just on that, Sadik, and so for parents to understand, and again, I've seen a lot of things over the years. I've, doing something for 18 years, you've almost seen all the different things that get thrown at you. There's a guy called Lewis Hatchett that played at Sussex, and he came out here as an 18-year-old. He had this really sort of flimsy body. He's actually got a thing called Poland syndrome. So half his rib cage is missing. And he got told he'd never actually play sport. But he sort of defied the odds. But he came out here and he bowled these little gentle outswingers. And in the first week he was out here, he broke down. He had his back, and he had to sort of work out whether he stayed out here or went home. And we talked to him, he decided to stay out here and work on the physical aspect. And at Christmas time, his body was good to go again. And it took a fair bit of convincing of him to actually bowl again, because he didn't want to go back and go through the same process that he'd sort of had for the last sort of 8 to 10 weeks. But we eventually convinced him he had to move forward. He had to have a go and just trust that the sort of the work he'd done over the last 8 to 10 weeks was going to pay off. So, but anyway, he was a machine that summer. He used to run to the gym. He just did everything possible, did extra stuff, all motivated by himself. And again, he was just, when you looked at him bowl, you sort of didn't really, he's just a gentle left-arm bowler that just playing a bit of club cricket. Anyway, he developed and he got stronger and stronger and stronger, and he went home. And when he went home, he actually debuted for Sussex, and I think he took 5 for on debut. And, Lewis had an 8-10 year career of professional cricket in the county system there in England. The point I'm making is he should have never, ever, ever done or did what he never done what he did, because he was told he wouldn't even play sport. But not only did he play sport, but he actually played at a professional level. And so the point I'm making is, and that's just a classic example of someone who just worked his backside off and wasn't prepared to listen to people telling him what he couldn't do, and he actually made a career out of and he's still actually playing. He still plays down there in the Sussex comp. He's made a career out of he's sort of a mindful coach. He does podcasts and stuff like that. He's made a career out of it. But his whole journey's actually created this sort of future for him in his life after cricket. I mean, again, that's just one example of someone that defied the odds. And as I said, I've been lucky enough to see a number of guys go and play international cricket. But for me, I mean, a story like that's almost one of the greatest stories that I've actually been privileged to actually see from my own eyes, of someone that's actually overcome so many things. So, like Sadik was saying, like talent, yes, you need some talent if you want to get to the higher levels of game. I get that, but it is massively overrated, and it doesn't guarantee anything. And I've seen cricketers that have lots of talent. We've all seen them, and they really they get found out, and they don't make it to the levels that they should. I look at a Rory Burns. You know, Rory played for England. Rory came out here. He's not the most gifted cricketer you've seen. He's ugly in his technique, but he's made Test hundreds. And he's a very strong-minded, very competitive, and he uses his ability to understand his game. And even as a he was only 20, understood his game, and he was just super tough, super competitive cricketer. And he overcame. I look at a Jason Roy who's also been out here, and Jason's probably got more ability in his little finger than what Rory's got in his whole body. But that it just shows the difference in if you've got the application and and you're prepared to work. It's amazing what can happen. I've in the case of Joe, I know the thing that he, bearing in mind Joe's story, was that he came out, he was only playing Yorkshire second 11 cricket. He hadn't played a first class game as a 19, 20-year-old. That summer he'd played a bit of England under 19s, but he came out, and this is according to his dad, he was floundering in second 11 cricket. Anyway, he went back that summer. English summer, he debuted in the first game. They had a pre-tour out at the West Indies. He made it into the first game of the year. He got a few runs. He made 100 about mid-season. He played the whole season. By the end of that summer, he was playing England A. So the thing that he says coming out here, what it did for him, it changed his mindset, his approach, and his attitude towards getting better changed, and therefore it changed his path. And things change, as we all know, things change very quickly. So these are the sorts of things that can happen, coming away and, as I said, immersing yourself. And if you're prepared to work, it's amazing, what can happen. I think the other thing that's really good for a young player is, when you come away on the other side of the world, that's an uncomfortable experience in itself, but there's no sort of familiarity with what you're doing. Sometimes your environment at home, because things are familiar, you're sort of hardwired into that, and sometimes it's difficult to make changes. I think when you go away on the other side of the world, it's almost like you start afresh, and it's easier to take things on board because you don't have those things surrounding you that you do at home. So you got different voices. You're not going home. People sort of saying the same sorts of things. You're getting a fresh perspective, and I think your mind opens up to new ideas by coming away. And again, I've seen that. We've had West Indian players that I think get locked into the West Indian way a bit at home, but they come out here and I'm sure of, by saying the things we say out here, I'm not sure those things would get through in the West Indies, but coming out to Australia, I think again their mind opens because things are different, and I think it's a natural thing that your mind opens up to perhaps new ways of doing things because of that. So yeah, there's lots to it. Again, I think that developing that personal aspect to things is not just a cricket thing for me. I think it's about young lads, and I always sort of say, coming out here as boys and going home as men. Growing up, it's taking a bit more responsibility. As I said, we don't hold your hand. You've got to do your cooking, your washing. You've got to make those decisions. You've got to get to training on your own. With public transport, you don't get picked up at the front door or driven there. You've got to get your own way there. And when you get to training, it's tough. And I remember, Ben Folkes was another player that came out here, and I said to Ben, and bearing in mind here, he said, "Oh, look, I got 4 batting coaches," and he was playing England A at the time, and he's living the lifestyle of the rich and famous with hotels and restaurants and things like that. And all of a sudden, he's cooking, he's washing, catching a train to go to the training nets. And I said, "Look, this is probably going to annoy you, but one thing, it's up to you now. You've got to actually, get yourself and do all these sorts of things. And when you get to training, you're going to get asked questions, and you've got to deliver." because one of the things you have to understand is the world's not perfect, and sometimes things are hard and tough and annoying, and you might turn up in a bad mood because you've had to get up and do all these sort of things, but then you got to deliver, and that's the way the world works. So unless you create space for people to grow into with these sorts of things, they don't develop those things. So and he sort of said one of the things that for him was he actually appreciated the nice things he was getting back in England, because he wasn't getting those things out here. So yeah, there's lots of things to it, and it's not just sort of, as I said. Look, I think here's another thing that I think is really important for you to understand. A lot of cricketers come out here and play club cricket, and that's it. But the difference in coming into a program is this. In Australia, because we don't play a lot, and that's just the way it's always been and always will be. So you have a hit every couple of weeks in a game because it's 2-day cricket. During the week, you have a couple of 10-minute hits at training. That's not going to get you better. That's not enough. You need to be doing all the extra stuff, and that's something like a program like this, is you're getting those extra hits during the week. You're accountable to someone. And even for an Australian lad that wants to go somewhere in the game, club training, playing club cricket is not enough. You've got to do extra outside. So, as I said, the other thing is you get comfortable going out and playing club cricket. You might go and do an extra session, but you do it when it suits you. Or in a program, you do it when it suits the program. So you might have to get up early in the morning and do it, as opposed to having to sleep in, doing 11 o'clock. And one of the things you've got to do to be a good cricketer or get the best out of yourself, you've got to have a hard competitive edge. And again, you don't get a hard competitive edge in comfort. You get that by actually doing things you don't want to do at times. And again, I've seen examples of that, of players coming out here and training in the program, going back to England, doing well, and then the following year coming out and picking and choosing when they want to do it and getting comfortable, and going back and struggling because there's no edge to their game. So, as I said, a program like this provides all that extra, and you're accountable to a coach and to a program who can ask questions. Whereas if you're just out here playing a bit of club cricket, well, you're accountable to no one. And a young lad does not know what he needs. They don't know what they need to do to be the best they can be. So they need structure. Young lads need structure. The senior player, again, someone like Plunkett or Shazad, Ajmal Shazad, that's been out here in their mid-20s, they know what they got to do. It's different for them. They understand themselves in the game, and they played high levels of cricket prior to coming out here. And for them, it's just ticking a few boxes in terms of what they need to work on. But it's clear in their minds. Young lads don't know that. They're still trying to work it out, and there's a huge difference. So I think that's a massive thing for a young player, is if you want to come out and just have a good time and have a summer in Australia at the beach, play a bit of cricket, well, fair enough. But if you actually want to get your game better, just playing a bit of club cricket's not going to do that. So I think that's an important thing to take into consideration.
Definitely. That's brilliant, Sean. What we'll do now is we'll open it out to the people on the call to ask any questions to Sean or Satik or myself, and then we'll go do a couple from the list of people I've not got. So has anyone got a question they'd like to ask Sean or Satik? Feel free to fire away. We've got a list of other ones, so just giving you the first crack if anyone's got anything they want to ask. We'll go.
Hey, hi. This is Ajay here from Netherlands. I have a question. So this program is for all age group players?
They've sort of got to be above 18 because they're living sort of in apartments. So they're housed in apartments. So what do you? I mean, we have had the odd younger player, but they've had a parent out here.
Yeah, but we've had, I think in the past, even now, we've had about 16, 17-year-olds join the program, but we've those we take interviews separately because, even the 16, 17-year-olds, some of them are quite matured, and they have lived, outside, on their own. So that's pretty much case to case basis, but on an average, it's around that 17, 18 and above, usually that players, we encourage those kind of players to be part of the program.
Oh, okay, I understand that. Thank you.
No worries.
Has anyone else got a question for Sean or Static before we go to a list? Okay, got a couple for you here, Sean, from a couple of people that couldn't make it. So, obviously, Joe came out to the program the year before he broke into the Yorkshire first team.
Yeah.
And the question is, how did he develop from when he first came to the day he left? How did he improve, and what aspects of his game grew during his time out in Adelaide?
Well, as I said before, one of the things was his mindset changed in terms of his approach to the game, and that changes what you do. Also, bearing in mind, I suppose some clear things for me was, and it's a bit hard to imagine, like what was he, 19? So Joe had a fair bit, he had a bit of puppy fat on him when he came out here, like Australia. He had skin folds of 130. So physically he had a fair bit of work to do. So that was something that he worked hard on and improved. I think, again, coming out and playing, he played at a club called Prospect. Playing cricket out here, the conditions were different. So he had to develop the back foot game more, because the wickets are different in Australia, like you've got to be able to play off the back foot. It's not so much the case in England. Again, funnily enough, I know his main skill is batting, but having said that, we saw him bowl and we said, you should work on your bowling because you actually bowl all right. And so he bowled a lot. So that actually became another part of his game out here. I just think the biggest thing for him was his development as him as a person, and it really sort of made him think about his game differently than what he had. And I think coming out here, again, I sort of touched on these things where he sort of had to stand on his own 2 feet and take the ownership over his game, as opposed to sort of, again, a lot of environments are telling players what to do all the time and they're just sort of robots almost. But Joe really enjoyed our way of training, like this sort of unstructured sort of stuff going on in the net. He thrived on that stuff. And he just loved it. You could see it, and he was so good at it. And his game sense, that's just such a big part of his game is because, for a guy that doesn't have a massive game, he's played international cricket in all 3 formats. So he's very smart as a cricketer. And the other thing with that is, just his ability to evolve as a cricketer, because the opposition at the highest level, they're always finding ways to stop you from being successful. So you've got to continue to evolve your game. You can't stay the same. You've got to find new things and overcome how they're sort of looking to get you out and, dominate you. So there's a skill in that. And I think all those things, the environment just sort of really, he just thrived in that environment. you know, I think if anything, when Joe was out here, he tried too hard. I actually think sometimes he does that even now. He's that determined to do well because you can try too hard that you actually can't, doesn't allow you to perform. And sometimes, you know, performance happens from, you got to allow that performance to happen, sort of thing. And I think out here at times he tried too hard. He was so desperate to do well. You just get so worked up over it, you actually don't allow yourself to perform. So, but he was just, again, he was just like Bessie. He was just one of those guys that was just asking. He was so hungry for information. And yeah, he grew up. I think he grew up out here in a good way.
Yeah.
I know. This is a true story with him. So he's at Yorkshire, and there's a guy called David Wainwright who was playing at the same time, and Wainwright has been out here too. But I remember him telling me after when Joe had gone back, when Joe went back to Yorkshire, in that first training session he went to Yorkshire after being out here, all the Yorkshire guys just said he's different. He's just different. So straight away, it changed him. And I remember, I'll never forget Wainwright saying that. They just said he's different. So I don't know. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it will have done. And then just finally, Sean, one last question from you was, evidently there's no guarantees in cricket, but for someone attending the high performance program, what do you say, what do you believe are the main takeaways they're going to get from it?
Okay, you're right. There are no guarantees, but what I'll say is if you're prepared to work your backside off out here and really engage in the program, you will get better. How much better? Who knows? But you will get better. If you come out here and you're going to mess around, there's no guarantees. As I said, I think, and again, I know this probably doesn't look sexy, but so much of being successful in anything is about you. And I think as a person, and I think that is a massive part of actually coming out here, because it just changes your perspective on what you need to do, life, and you just grow up and they become things with you for the rest of your life. So that stuff, and, you know, as I said, I mean, it's easy to sort of say that stuff, but again, I'm backing it up by saying we run a leadership program that focuses in on this stuff. So it's not just sort of airy-fairy talk, and it's actually backed up by a program that actually that's what it's about. And these people that are running this program, they actually work with AFL sides. So the Brisbane Lions, who played in the AFL Grand Final, they work with them. So it's not just sort of some little put together backyard operation. This is working with a business that actually is working with the best, you know, some of the best sporting teams in Australia. And that's a reflection on actually how important I think this stuff is by engaging people of that level.
Definitely.
Sorry, I just want to quickly add was, I mean, when we kind of counsel players and, what we tell them that, look, we have the tools, we have the mechanism. At the end of the day, it's up to you how you want to take those tools and then prepare yourself in the game. When we ask players what you want to do, what you want to become, and again, I think Sean will agree, when we asked Joe said, I want to play for England. That was his statement. Like, there was nothing. We have players who said, I want to get better in my club. I want to reach a district level. With Joe, it was just plain and simple. He said, I just want to play for England. That was his hunger. That was his desperation. So we have the tools. It's just basically, what the players want to do, with the tools offered to them.
Definitely.
He actually said that. Like like I actually asked him, and he said, and it was the way he said it, I want to play for England. There was no half-hearted, like, or just wishful thinking. It was like, I want to play for England.
Yeah. If there's no further questions from anyone on the call, we'll start to wrap it up, and I hope that's been beneficial for everyone who has been on the webinar. And I know if needed, if you want to ask Sean or Static a question, you'll be able to get in touch with us afterwards, and we can sort out getting an answer for you on that. And if you are looking for any more information on the high performance program, all you got to do is visit our website, which tells you everything you need to know about the program and what it incorporates and what it includes. And one final thing that I would add is that we've just recently launched a deposit option for the 2024-25 high performance program. So players wanting to secure their spot in advance now have an option to do that. And again, that can be accessed in more detail via our website. So I'd recommend everyone looking out on that. And if you are wanting to get involved in the high performance program a bit sooner, we do have a limited number of places left for the post-Christmas series. So again, I would recommend checking out our website, and that will have any information you need. So I think we'll wrap up there. So Sean, Satik, thank you so much for your time.
It's all right.
Hope you found it beneficial as much as I, and hopefully the people on the call did as well. So thanks for joining, everyone. Hope you found it beneficial and useful. And yeah, thank you, and all the best.
Thank you.